Hello, and thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Helen Sazlowski, the Events Director for Oblong Books in New York's Hudson Valley. If you have questions at any time during our program, please type them into the chat or in the Q&A module that you'll find at the bottom of your screen, and we'll address them at the end of the conversation portion of the program. This evening's event is presented in partnership with Red Hook Public Library, Tivoli Free Library, Starr Library in Rhinebeck, and Morton Memorial Library, as part of the NEA Big Read Hudson Valley. For more information on the Big Read and to access a calendar of events for this month-long celebration, as well as locations where you can pick up copies of the NEA's recommended reading list, visit bard.edu/Big Read, and I'll post the link for that in the chat a little later on. We're delighted this evening to welcome authors Yasmín Ramírez and Candelaria Fletcher, who will talk with journalist and author Guillermo Fesser about their new books, which both contain themes that resonate with the themes in this year's Big Read featured book, The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. In his striking new essay collection, Finding Querencia, published by Mad Creek Books, Candelaria Fletcher ventures into the fault lines of culture, landscape, and spirit to discover the source of his lifelong hauntings. He is also the author of Presentimiento, I'm sorry, I mispronounced that, Presentimiento, A Life in Dreams, winner of the Autumn House Press Nonfiction Prize and finalist for the International Latino Book Award and a Kirkus Review's Best Indie Memoir of 2017. His book, Descanso for My Father, Fragments of a Life, won the Colorado Book Award and Independent Publisher Book Award's Bronze Medal for Creative Nonfiction. And his work has appeared in literary journals and anthologies, including New Letters, Fourth Genre, Puerto del Sol, Brief Encounters, and the Touchstone Anthology of Contemporary Creative Nonfiction. A former columnist, feature writer, and beat reporter for newspapers throughout the West, Harrison teaches in the MFA writing programs at Vermont College of Fine Arts and Colorado State University. Welcome, Harrison.
Thank you. Welcome, Helen.
Yasmín Ramírez's debut autobiography, Andale Prieta, published by Lee and Loeb Books, illustrates the bond between a grandmother and a granddaughter and explores the grief of losing it. Adults and young readers alike will be able to identify with her journey to find her identity and also the struggle of growing up between two cultures as a Mexican American. Yasmín is a 2020 recipient of the Woody and Gail Hunt Aspen Institute Fellowship Award, as well as being a 2018 Dickinson House Fellow. She is an associate professor of English and creative writing at El Paso Community College and serves on the board of Border Senses, a literary nonprofit. Welcome, Yasmín.
Thank you.
Both books are available in our stores and online through oblongbooks.com, and I'll post the links in the chat for those of you who would like to purchase a copy. Moderating the conversation for us this evening, we are delighted to welcome Spanish journalist, author, and filmmaker Guillermo Fesser. Fesser is the author of 100 Miles from Manhattan, and his forthcoming novel, Marcelo, is due for publication in Spain and Mexico later this year. Welcome to you all. It's a pleasure to have you with us, and I'm going to hand it over now to Guillermo.
Hola, Helen. Un placer. Pleasure to be here with everybody. And hi, Yasmín. Hello, Harrison. ¿Cómo estamos?
Bien.
To me, it's a pleasure to be here because I've been in the United States for almost 15 years now, and when I came to the United States from Spain, I thought I was coming to a world that was completely distant from my own culture, from my own idea of life, from my own way of living. And I've been more and more surprised every day in every corner of this amazing country of how many hints of Spanish culture I found in food, in people, in landscaping, in clothing, in traditions, much more than I never thought. I always knew that the people who spoke Spanish went south. Nobody told me ever that they went north too, and they were here for many years and they did a lot of stuff. So I am so moved anytime that I hear that more new people, new authors, new talent go on the stage and share our beautiful culture with the rest of the American fellow, so we can understand each other better. I read both of your books. I'm really impressed with both of the books and how open your heart was when you were writing these stories, how personal they are and how beautiful they are because they're personal. And the more personal something is, the more universal it gets. So I'm going to start asking each of you, and I start, Yasmín is the one who I see closer here on the screen. What triggered, what happened to you to decide to go ahead and open your heart and tell that story?
Wow, I don't think I made a conscious decision to do it, actually, to say I'm going to share this entire section of my life. The whole book started as a short story, not a very good one. I should start with that. And it was just a way for me to deal with my grandmother's death, my Ita. And I started just writing as a way to deal with her loss and to sort of sort out my feelings. And then it just started growing. And suddenly the short story was like 25 pages. And then it was different sections. And then it was various short stories. And now it's Ándale Prieta.
Okay, we're gonna start hearing some of these stories pretty soon. But let me ask Harrison, Candelaria Fletcher the same question. What triggered? What happened? A guy from New Mexico that suddenly has to tell the world that, hey, I'm Spanish too.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Good question. I will try to be succinct. So my book is called Finding Querencia, and that's derived from the verb querer, which is to want or to desire. And it means, as you guys know, a place of belonging and safety that you yearn for, kind of like your home. And as a New Mexican of mixed ethnicity, my mom is Latino, my dad is white. I've been trying to find that space for myself for most of my life. I guess another way of saying it, I kind of have a hyphenated identity, like a walking contradiction almost. You know, the person you see on the outside is not necessarily the person I see for myself on the inside. And so this book is kind of an attempt to find that space, to claim that space. And in that way, I think it was very much inspired by Sandra Cisneros' House on Mango Street, which, you know, is one of those books that, you know, kind of gave me permission when I was starting out to write in your own language and in your own form, and to kind of discover yourself and your world on the page. So that's
okay,
the short answer.
Yeah, no, I mean, beautiful. Let's start with Ándale Prieta. Yasmín, why don't we hear something from your book, a little something, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. So I'm going to start, actually, it's the second chapter. And you'll see right now, I'm going to make a joke. I'm going to come out swinging. Because that's how the story starts, and I'm just going to read a little section of it. At the time, it seemed normal. Later, I learned that most grandmas don't teach their granddaughters to fight, especially when their granddaughters are only in first grade. But there she was, holding her clenched fists in a fighter stance in front of me. Si alguien te pega, ¿qué vas a hacer? So what would I do if someone punched me? Punch them back? No empieces nada, pero no te dejes, eh? Okay, Ita, I won't start anything, but I won't let myself get pushed around either. Y más vale que ganes, eh? Porque si no, cuando llegues a la casa, te voy a poner otra chinga. I stared at Ita, letting her words sink in. I really don't think she would have given me a chinga if I lost the fight, but just in case, I was definitely not going to lose. Earlier that day at Lamar Elementary, Eric had pulled my braid. He pulled so hard, the red plastic bolita at the crown of my head snapped. Pop. Mrs. John, my teacher, asked me what had happened when I came in from recess. My hair all over, I told her my bolita had broken. I stared up into her crinkled blue eyes when she asked me again, but I told her the same thing, and this time I looked down.
Okay, Yasmín, so here you are growing up in America as an American. It's one more Americans. There's so many Americans, and when you're one of them, but you have roots in a different planet almost, right? Sometimes I'm sure sometimes it felt like who are those people? My family. And and you're talking about abuelita who was like boxing. And I mean, how was that growing up with that? I mean, I'm sure it was like a roller coaster, man, of emotions.
I think what's interesting is I thought it was completely normal until I would share the stories of growing up. And I think the more I told the story, I was like, oh, this is a good story. I'm getting like people are laughing that my grandma showing me how to throw a punch, and she's telling me, not to let myself get pushed around, and she's going to give me a chinga, which she didn't ever, right? That's the most hilarious part. And the more I told the story, the more I realized it was not how most people grew up. And just even our relationship, right? I spoke English to my grandmother and she spoke Spanish. We both spoke both, but we were just more comfortable. Here in El Paso, it's very frequent to hear English and Spanish just mixed all the time, even in the same sentence. And so that in itself, I sort of didn't think was abnormal. And then I'm like, oh, wait, it was brought to my attention that it was not typical of most people and how they grew up. So I had layers, I had language, I had fighting grandma, I learned how to box. So it was just, I think it was wonderful. I'm sure somewhere someone is thinking, oh my God, a first grader is learning how to throw punches. But I thought it was wonderful.
Okay, we're gonna hear from you from your book, Harrison. But let me ask you before: did you grow up hearing in Spanish at all at home, or it was all?
Yeah. My mom's family on both sides dates back to the 1600s in New Mexico, and that my mom is fluent. My whole mother's family is fluent, and I never knew my dad's family at all. So I grew up kind of immersed in the bilingual world, but usually they spoke Spanish when they didn't want us to understand what was going on. So that's how I kind of were like, we tune in when they were speaking Spanish about whatever. So yes, I did, to answer your question. Yeah.
Okay, well, what are we going to listen to, or what are you going to read?
So I'm going to read the prologue for my book, and just the very quick preface is a lot of the book is written in a persona, like a character of like my younger self. They called it, when I was growing up, they would call somebody who's of mixed ethnicity coyote. It's kind of like a New Mexican slang for mutt or mongrel or mixed. And so in this book, I kind of, to find my way into that younger self, I adopted that persona of coyote, and to reclaim that, I guess. And so this is a prologue that kind of sets all that in motion. Okay. My mother, an artist and collector, spent a lifetime trying to rescue her New Mexican past. She kept her most cherished artifacts in a nickel-plated hope chest beneath our front window. Near the bottom, beneath a double-sided dowry mirror and crown of thorns from the Penitente Brotherhood, she placed an Easter mask from the Yaqui tribe of southern Arizona. Part human and part deer, with a cottonwood face fringed with horsehair, the relic was as strange and beautiful as a 400-year-old ceremony from which it came, an enactment of the passion play with native deities and biblical figures performing rituals from both traditions. Near the end of the weeks-long series of pageantry and dance, the masks were burned in a plaza bonfire to celebrate the resurrection of Christ. I wasn't supposed to play with it, which of course meant I did. And one summer evening, while my mother tended her rosas de Castilla outside, I slipped on the rough-hewn face covering and stood before a broad living room mirror. I remember being terrified by the cobwebs brushing my cheeks and the suffocating smell of mothballs and mold. But it was the eyes that held me, my eyes, shining like opals beneath the twisted animal features and bringing the spirit to life as if some hidden side of me had stepped out from the trove of memory. Standing before my reflection, it wasn't the Pascola face that scared me, but what I recognized behind it. Wearing the mask, I saw myself.
Wow. Well, that amazing. Yeah. Yeah, that person inside that you were mentioned before, right? And both of you, I mean, that's for both of you. Is there a point in growing up when one sees that the background and the reality could live together? I mean, when your culture is so unique and so different, right? There's moments of embarrassment because who wants to be different growing up? Who wants to be in high school and be different? You want your mother look like every other mother and do what the mother is supposed to do, right? And that's the way it is, and live in the place they're supposed to live and all that stuff. So when is all this embarrassment or joy or difference or whatever comes together, if it ever comes together? I mean, how do you guys live in your inside and your outside, and how can you be sane and healthy doing that?
You take that one, Yasmín.
Yeah, that's for you. 2 points if you get out of this one.
I think what's interesting, I can't speak for where Harrison grew up, but I have a very unique experience in that where I grew up, it's 80% Latinx. So I never felt othered or weird inside my skin until I traveled outside of El Paso, because everyone here is like me. They speak varying levels of Spanish, sometimes no Spanish, sometimes only Spanish. Like there's just a broad spectrum. And so people just get by like, oh, okay, she doesn't speak Spanish that much, they'll try English and things like that. And it wasn't until, as I said, I traveled outside that I suddenly started to feel like, wait a minute, I feel different. And why are people looking at me? Because I'm darker complected, I'm prieta. And that's when I realized, oh wait, something's different. And then of course, I get the ever present, where are you from? And I would say El Paso. And then, no, but where are you really from? And I would say El Paso. And then they would say, where are your parents from? And I would say El Paso. So finally, they would just get brave enough and be like, well, where are your ancestors from? And so I would say, yeah, I have ancestry in Mexico, but I haven't been there or have had family there for a very long time. And so that seems like new news. People who ask those types of questions don't realize that Latinx people have been in the United States for a very long time, and not everyone just arrived.
Yeah, well, it's not the people that move here, the border moves out, right? Right.
Exactly.
Harrison.
The border crossed us, yes. Boy, that's a book, that question.
Yeah, well, maybe the next book.
Exactly. No, I mean, I guess for me it was there's two incidents when it brought into, I guess, high relief these questions you're asking. I grew up in the North Valley of Albuquerque, near the Rio Grande Valley, which was traditionally a place where farm country and all the Latinos lived. And it was also like a fault line in terms of the Anglo culture and the Latinx culture. And I went to a middle school where those tensions were pretty high. And, I grew up how I grew up with my mom's family, but I looked the way I look. And so like every spring, there would be these fights that would break out between the Anglos and Chicanos. And I was always caught in between. And that's why I started to realize, where do I fit in? How do I choose? Sometimes I would, get beaten up for being the white kid, and other times, it would be the other way around. So I was always trying to negotiate that space. And
sometimes probably double difficult because you don't belong. None of them like you, right?
Yeah, I mean, and and my mother's family is 10 different colors of brown. So it's just a very complicated thing. And like Yasmín, in New Mexico, most sites, I don't know, when I was growing up there, about 60% was Latino, and Spanish was spoken all the time. And so that's where a lot of the tension first started. And then I got older and wanted to get the hell out of New Mexico, and I moved to California. And in California, everything's new, everything is now, and everything is, I don't know, very commercialized, I guess, in some ways in Southern California. And I realized how special, how different New Mexico was, and how much a part of that place that I tried to leave was still rooted in me. And so for me, I kind of had to leave home before I could find it. And I just, because I didn't when I was in California, I just found myself not being able to relate to in the same way that I had in New Mexico. So I went back.
Okay, we're gonna talk in a minute about what the idea of Latino means for you people, and if you feel like you belong to that community, or that's some community that somebody invented in some university and really doesn't exist. I don't know, but let's read a little more from Yasmín's book. And before that, let's go to the title, Ándale Prieta. Tell us why Prieta, what Prieta means, and what Ándale means, what the whole thing is.
What Ándale means. I think, Guillermo, you must be psychic, because I was about to read about Prieta right now. So Ándale means like come on or hurry up. You can say it in different ways, and then Prieta just means dark complected. And while it can have a negative connotation, in the book, I'm highlighting its positive connotation. And so the section I'm about to read will actually kind of address this idea of Prieta as well. So this is about midpoint in the book. And I have to highlight how, at least with I think it's prominent in the Latino community, how nicknames are just popular, right? And so my nickname growing up from my grandmother was Prieta. And so I'm going to go into that. Ita called me Prieta. She called me this because my skin is a toasted brown. When I was born, my mom says I was light-skinned, but she knew, que iba a ser morena, that I was going to be darker because of the insides of my little baby thighs were already darker than the rest of me. In the sun, I turn a darker brown. I get even more Prieta. Prieta is a term of endearment. When I tell people who don't speak Spanish what Prieta means, dark or the dark one, their eyes pop open and a small gasp escapes. I see the offense they feel for me sprinkled on their faces like the freckles I will never have. How do I tell them when I heard Ita say Prieta? I felt the caress of her strong hands on the top of my head as she braided my hair. How do I tell them that I never knew what Prieta really meant until some light-skinned Mexican kids laughed at me and said I had to be more Mexican than them because I was bien Prieta? How do I tell them when they said the word, it turned ugly, and I called them wetbacks in response? How do I tell them that now, even after the cruelty of children, Prieta means love, that each time Prieta fell from her lips, I learned to love my dark skin. No one calls me that anymore. I miss how her words sounded aloud. My Ita called me Prieta. When she died, she took the name with her.
So what makes me think that every name with love is lovely, right? I mean, the same word Prieta could be an insult and could be the most lovely compliment, right? Yeah, exactly. That's life, right? That's life. It's all about intentions more than data. Or back to Mr. Candelaria Fletcher. Finding querencia. You talk about querencia at the beginning. So it's finding your little corner where you feel like comfort and love, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And in that struggle, you create beautiful chapters, and I would like to hear a little more.
Thank you. So I'm going to read there's 6 short fragments, and this is one of those persona essays I was talking about, and it's written in long sentences with no punctuation to kind of enact a kind of reaching, and it's based on different kinds of mixing, different kinds of ingredients. And so I'll read 6 short sections from Coyote Cookbook. It's
okay. I want to tell you before that.
Sure.
I mean, your first language is English. Your second language is Spanish, or Yasmín. Mine is the opposite. And finding no commas, no stops, and nothing in your thing is like, well, what is this guy doing? But I understand. I mean, the rhythm. It's like it's on your face, man.
Yeah. It was just just a quick digression. It's written in these long, no punctuation sentences. It's kind of like I was envisioning roots, trying to find their way to something. So right. That's the idea. So anyway, okay. Coyote Cookbook. 1, beans. Because they're cheap and they're good and they always last longer than the government checks boiling slowly away in the Pyrex pot on the open flame, building pressurized steam to slow cook the garlic and bay leaves in oil, to a river brown broth soaking down to your roots to bloom from your bones to fill up your table at supper. 2, tortillas, which you love more than bread, but can never get right, with an ingredient missing from the salt shortening flour that sticks to your skin with a white you can't wash. So you form instead an imperfect ball rolled into the shape of a ghost ship from Iowa, where your father came from before he sighed through the curtains of his hospital room to fill your house with a silent moon on a cast iron comal while you wait with a plate the size of the hole in your stomach. 3, enchiladas, rolled up tight or laid out and layered, like your mother's whole family in the back of the Buick, on a bed of quilts as warm as onions and cheese, while they drive from Corrales to Los Angeles again, so your grandfather can paint enough wartime destroyers to fill the 9 mouths fast asleep through the desert, with road stripes stabbing like forks and knives to pull them apart before they're even done dreaming. And one more, I'll end with this one. Chilindron. Because you never eat turkey on Thanksgiving Day, since your mother adopted stray ducks, geese, and owls, and planted a branch of dried cedar in a tub of rocks from the river, where your Christmas tree stood and said, being different is good. And if you really want to know, she's more Basque than Latina, and made of garlic and red peppers and ham and chicken, and lemon and white wine and Spanish olives and Roma tomatoes, still retaining their flavor while simmering whole. And isn't that the whole point of sustenance anyway?
Well, thank you. You know, I mean, I have a theory that is, you know, a very stupid theory, like every theory that, you know, I may have. But I mean, for me, the idea of the mission of a writer when writes a book is almost like giving flavors. And then those flavors in the reader will trigger, you know, their own memories, and he will create their own story according to those memories, right? That's why you read the same book that I read, that Yasmín reads, and we read a different book, each one, because the flavors that I put on my scene of the kitchen are completely different from the flavors that you put on the same scene of the kitchen, or the yelling of the neighbor is a very different yelling than the yelling of your neighbor. And I think that's, you know, that's the beauty of books and of writing. It's like giving the possibility of people to bring their own reality into the story and be part of it. And back to the Latino question, back of, well, the main idea of being part of something. Here we are in the United States of America. And I want to ask you, looking at the future, I mean, what do you think about a possibility of finding common ground of this Latino, Latinx, Hispanic family, whatever we want to call it? If there's such a thing, and you see a future of you know, these two communities that sometimes are almost like oil and water, if they can, you know, flow together and share together and have fun together. That's about it, right? I mean, it's like the more you know about your roots, the more fun you can have in life.
Harrison, do you want to start on this one?
Yeah, some thoughts about that. I don't know.
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, I see that, you know, I teach in a couple of writing programs, and I see, you know, young writers of color making spaces for themselves, you know, creating their own languages, creating their own stories, you know, challenging all these binaries and containers that we were forced to fit in when we were growing up. It's like, which box do you check on the census? And they're like, you know, none. So that's really heartening to me. I mean, I think that the young generation, Yasmín's generation, you know, they are making these connections. You know, these borders are now intersections in a way that they weren't so much when I was growing up, or when my mom was growing up, or when my grandfather was growing up. And, you know, they were told not to teach their kids English, and, you know, they were laughed at for eating tortillas in school, you know, and all that stuff. No, the generation today is embracing that and taking it to a next level. And I find that really exciting, and who knows what's going to happen, but just from, yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say. It's again, getting back to, Sandra Cisneros' book, she created her own little home between the pages of that novel, that hybrid novel. And I see that happening every day, in the young people that I come in contact with. So I'm heartened by that. And my daughter's one of those, so I'm kind of plugged for my daughter and my son.
I remember being in San Diego once and hearing somebody said, speak English. This is not Tijuana, this is San Diego. And a lady turned around and said, can you tell me how you say San Diego in English again?
Right.
So, Yasmín, your turn.
I think I'm also hopeful. And I also think that, in prior generations, there was sort of this forced assimilation, right? Of if you take away language, if you take away food, people start to lose their culture. And now culture is being celebrated a lot more. And even if you look at something simple, right, and benign, like ancestry tests, like to see, oh, what am I made of, right? People are so interested in that. And so I think as we go forth, if we continue to celebrate culture, we'll start to see that we're not as different as we think we are, right? If those differences are forced when we're forced to assimilate, because some people are able to adapt faster than others. And then we start to see like, wait, we're not all the same. But if we already acknowledge, like, we're not the same, but let's see what we're made of, then we start to see something interesting. And I like to speak an analogy a lot. I love food so much. So right now that piece that you read, Harrison, was great. But something I love to see is like something as simple as like a tamal, right? All the different Latino cultures have a version of a tamal, which is beautiful. They're not the same. I've had a couple that have to get used to, right? Because I'm so used to my kind of tamal, but we're just so closely related that it's hard not to celebrate like these similarities versus looking so closely at the differences.
Okay, let's hear a little more about your books. We're in Andale Prieta right now. We can hear a little more about your Ita.
So I'm actually going to read a last little section, and I think it'll link right to this where are we from question, right, that comes up. Okay. It plagues us. Where are you from? And so I'm taking out a section because it's a longer chapter, but and here I'm discussing my ancestry just a little bit. So the names, those are my ancestors' names. So where am I from? I come from Francisco and Maria, Manuela and Pedro, Guadalupe and Alfredo, Alicia and Manuel, Leticia and Jesus, a long line of people who also pursued a better life. And I live in the largest and oldest border town in the United States, El Paso, El Chuco to locals. Its land once belonged to Mexico, but even when it changed owners, its roots, las raíces, remained Mexican. My skin is still brown because the land is still brown. And even the gringo transplants who move here, professors at UTEP, Fort Bliss military, or customs agents start to turn a little brown too. La cultura is the marriage of two things, Mexican and American, Spanish and English, tacos al pastor and Texas side steaks. My family is all these things, and this is our story.
Harrison, you're in academia, and yeah, exactly. Whatever you do, that.
I was doing the finger snaps for Yasmín.
No, you're in academia, so you have a very privileged way of looking. Well, Yasmín is too, but I mean, maybe for both. But I'm talking to you right now. How do you see? I mean, we're celebrating Sandra Cisneros' house in Mango Street. She was a pioneer, but thank God she opened a door for many other people, and here you are. And we see more and more voices of Latinos from different backgrounds and different ethnicities and different cultural backgrounds. But how's the panorama right now? How you see it? I mean, how's the Latino voice in this country right now? I mean, is it still a very, very minority?
No, I mean, and I don't want to be idealistic. I think we're all aware of the pushback that's happening now in a lot of different ways. But at the same time, I think it's a very good time to be, a Latinx writer now, and there's plug for my book and my press.
Can you show it? So can you show it a little longer? Yeah, just because I never saw it. I only saw the Kindle version, so I like to see the cover. Nice.
Oh, thank you.
Finding Querencia, therewith.
No, there are this press, and there are other presses out there that are looking specifically for new voices, new writing styles, new experiences, new ways of telling their own stories of America, because these are all American stories to me. And I think that there are more places than there used to be, and there's an openness now. And I think, and this is just my opinion, just from what I see from my students, I think the writers now are probably tougher than maybe we were. And what I mean by that is that they don't seem to take no, or they don't seem to take as much stuff as we did. If they were told no, they just keep trying. It's like, this is my story, this is the way I'm going to tell it, and you don't want it, someone else will. And that to me is inspiring. So I see there's a lot more publisher awareness than there used to be, which I think is a good thing. There could always be more, and I hope that there will be. But I don't know, Yasmín may see that too. I don't know, but that's in terms of the number of new voices and places to speak. I think they're getting a little better than they used to be.
What do you think, Yasmín? And we're gonna go to your excerpt, but I mean, Yasmín, what do you think about that?
I agree. I think something happens too with language, right? We're learning how to use different language. And so, for example, when we say that Latinos are a minority, I would argue and say, no, we're just marginalized. We're not a minority at all. We're the largest ethnic population in the United States. And so when you marginalize voices, that's where they start to get muted. But right now, I did that, Harrison. I sent this book several places and they said no. And I was like, no, this is something. I have something, I know it. And I kept working, and then at one point I got the kindest no I'd ever had in my life. And I was like, okay, something is missing in the book. So I needed another pair of eyes. And so I think that's what other young writers are realizing. Like, I do have something to say. Maybe I just need some help in learning how to navigate the space that Latinx have not been entirely in for very long, right? Because if we really look at Sandra Cisneros' book, it was in the 80s, which is not that long ago, when we have, long longevity for white authors, or, William Shakespeare to Sandra Cisneros. Well, that's a big difference, right? But Sandra has paved the way for people like me, people like Harrison, and I think I'd like to look at my role as a writer as an extension of that, right? Like, I'm helping a future me somewhere along the line who didn't ever think they could write a book. And maybe now, because I have my title's in Spanish, which is complete Spanish, right? And so a lot of people might not be able to say "Ándale, Prieta." And I really wanted to keep that because it was so integral to the book. So maybe someone else, a young person, will see this and say, okay, maybe I don't have to have an English title. Maybe I can have a Spanglish title, and it'll work and it'll sell.
Yeah, you said William Shakespeare to Sandra Cisneros, not even Cervantes in between. And I remember this guy from California who told me that he grew up thinking that Don Quixote was the story of a donkey. Don Quixote, he never read it. Anyways, let's hear a little bit more about Querencia, Finding Querencia.
Okay, good, thank you. So this, I read the prologue, now this is going to be the epilogue, and it's kind of a metaphorical thing. So, okay. And it's called Chrysalis. One December evening, my mother brought home a dead cedar tree. She cleared away the antique tables and chairs, shooed away our stray dogs and cats, and anchored the trunk in the center of our living room in a washtub of rocks from the Rio Grande. And there it stood throughout the holidays, as bent back and broken as a pilgrim on the road to Santuario de Chimayo. She offered no explanation beyond something about sculpture and how Douglas firs had become, quote, too literal. And when I asked her about it, she placed a hand on my shoulder and encouraged me to see beyond what stood before me and instead toward what it could become. I tried, but I couldn't get past the black widow's eggs in the bark or the way the torso leaned sideways like one of the men drinking whiskey on the ditch behind our house. And yet there were mornings when she sprinkled piñon sawdust on the floor furnace, and in the gauzy haze of wood smoke, the cedar tree became a cross on the edge of the mesa, marking ground where a spirit had left a body in a lightning storm, and families visited with rosaries and plastic flowers to help the soul find its way. And in those moments, the trunk resembled less a carcass than a root or even a chrysalis. When it came time to decorate its branches, we set aside the plastic bulbs and electric lights from Kmart and crafted instead dozens of ojos de Dios, small wooden tees woven together with cotton yarn into bands of turquoise and sunflower with vibrant centers of apple red and alfalfa green. The tradition came from the Tepehuan people of Mexico, my mother said, and symbolized the eyes of God watching over the birth of a child or the arrival of something new. Listening to her talk, I hung my ojitos as carefully as if I were lighting candles on an altar. On Christmas morning, my mother poured a pitcher of warm water into the wash tub, and the room filled with the scent of rain and soil from the llano. And in the white light of our broad living room window, from stone, from wood, a blooming.
Well, I'm going to say that to the people who are listening to following this webinar, whatever this event is called, that if they want to post any questions, we can have Q's and A's, and we're more than welcome to use their questions and talk to Yasmín and Harrison about it. But I would like to ask Yasmín about the idea of, she says there's an idea or a movement of normalizing Spanish more into the conversation. I tend to see books from Latino authors before you guys that, you know, they're very moderate about using Spanish, or if there's one where the translation comes immediately. And now I see that in Andale Prieta, they use sometimes sneak phrases that they don't get in translations. And it's not only in books. I mean, go to the Spielberg's last movie, West Side Story. I mean, I was in the movie theater. I said, I mean, if people are not bilingual here, I don't know, what are they getting? Because there's no mercy. There was no subtitles, and there were like conversations in Spanish going up and down. But then I thought, well, at least this is New York City. You go to New York City, you hear languages, and you don't need it to be translated all the time. That's your reality, right? So what do you think, Yasmín? I mean, and how much you struggle to put some Spanish in the book? Is that okay? Is the publisher saying, okay, well, just a little phrase here and there, no more? Is you the one who actually just pull the brake? How does it work?
I think there's two parts of the question. So I'll answer the first part about me personally. In that it was really important for me to keep my grandmother speaking Spanish because that was authentic to her character, right? It's weird. Real life, I have my real life Ita, but then I have to think of her on the page as a character. And it would have been so inauthentic to have her speak English the entire time. It would have killed me. I wouldn't have been able to progress like that. Luckily, I've had really supportive people in my life who said, okay, put the Spanish, but try to give some context. Okay, do this, but maybe this is too heavy-handed. And so luckily, when I started working with Cinco Puntos Press before they were purchased by Lee and Low, the press was here in El Paso. And so they published lots of Latinx authors. And so she was very honest with me and said, like, this one's too much. Like, can you cut back on this? And you can have this. So it was kind of a negotiation at times. And then working with the editors at Lee and Low was amazing because they were also like, no, keep the Spanish, do this. Maybe just give a little context here for non-native speakers. And so something that I think is happening, at least I hope, I'm an optimist, but I feel like before, Spanish language was not celebrated. It was looked down upon, to where in the past you would see like French in a book and it was like, ooh, there was no translation, but it was ooh, French, so fancy. And so now I think the same thing is, I think Spanish is like fighting. Like, no, I hold the same weight. I hold the same level of beauty in the language, right? And it's really fighting to show that. And so I think it's also highlighting how the demographic of the United States is not changing, but being celebrated versus like forced to assimilate. That's what I would like to believe. I don't know, Harrison, what do you think?
No, I mean, I totally agree with you too. I was going to ask you too. I mean, there's also, you didn't italicize, right?
No.
Which I like. And I was wondering what that was a choice too, is not to italicize.
Yeah, that was my choice for sure.
Because nobody speaks in italics, right?
No, we don't. And it was quite obvious I was changing languages, so I didn't think it had to be italicized. When I was writing the book, I even realized that was a controversial thing, like italics and not italics. And I was like, no, I don't want italics. So yeah, it's interesting.
I think it's great. I mean, one of my colleagues just said, well, Google exists, so people, it's like an invitation into this other culture, this other experience. If you look it up, I think that's great. You're bridging those borders that we're talking about. So yeah.
It's more like, you can hide it, paint it red, right? It's like, I mean, if it's in your face, it's like, that's the way it is, right? If you do a little justification, it's like you're trying to justify something, and I don't know, it's just, but I mean, the reality, I mean, at least as a reader, I can see more Spanish and more welcome and more normalized in the general conversation. I don't know about being an author though. I mean, you feel like you are labeled somehow. I mean, you're an American author. Both of you are American authors who wrote books. But I mean, here we are celebrating because of Sandra Cisneros, the Latino, whatever, and you two happen to be here. I don't know, you feel like you're part of a quota, or you're labeled like Latino writers, or you're a Spanish writing, or no, I mean, just happen to be here because you're here.
I think it goes back to this hyphenated existence. I think we're both. We'll always be both. At least in my lifetime. Maybe after it'll just start to be like we're this. But I think we're both in that. I am very much being labeled as a Latina author, which is okay because I'm Latina, right? I use Spanish. I'm very happy with the label. But I'm also American, and I think that that's also part of it. I think it's educating people that you can be two things and embrace two things fully and have pride in both things, and it doesn't make you less in one or the other.
Yeah, I think you said it wonderfully. It's like, I hope not that people are not getting, pigeonholed, but I would just say, I happen to be an author who's Latino, or that's not all. I mean, that there's so many different selves and so much more to who we are than just our ethnicity or our race. And I hope that people can see beyond that at some point. And we're writers, we're artists too, and we're writing from our experience. And why can't we just be that? But no, I mean, again, I don't want to be Pollyannish or whatever. I think that it's also a struggle too to have your work seen that way, and to fight.
Yeah, I mean, and exposure in a different culture is like, because I mean, it's not always about the language. You can be Spanish or feel Spanish without speaking Spanish. You know what I mean? It's because a language is a way of expressing a culture. And that's what sometimes, people don't understand. It's not about, okay, I know Spanish, so it's raining, llueve. No, I mean, what you are understanding is that you can have the three wise men delivering the presents, so you can have Santa Claus. And, you want Santa Claus, you have to give him some cookies and milk. And you want the three wise men, you better give him cigars and brandy, because cookies and milk won't work for them. But guess what? They bring presents the day after, and that's what you want. So you can achieve the same, you can resolve the same problem in different ways. And having two cultures make you, be able to navigate and understand that maybe somebody else may be right, and that there's two possibilities. Hopefully you will understand that maybe there's 3 and 4 and 5. And I mean, it makes your life more open, right? And more reach. I think, I don't know, you feel that way, fortunate in a way that you have more tools to go through the street, right? Because we all go from home to the school, the same street, but some kids go looking down and they don't see anything, and some kids look at every single window, and right?
Mhm. Yeah.
I think that's a great way to view it. I think it took me a while to get there. And I think I'm going to piggyback. Harrison, earlier you said you had to leave home to appreciate home.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
sure.
the same thing happened for me. And I think I had to be othered, right? In these other spaces where I was very aware, excuse me, of my color and my cultural background to appreciate it. And I think then, yeah, it is a celebration and it is beneficial, the tools. And I think I've noticed the benefits of those tools the most is when I've traveled like outside of the United States. I'm like, oh, more people speak Spanish, or people will ask me where I'm from, and I'll say, oh, I'm from the United States, but then they'll kind of look at me and they'll be a little kinder than they would to maybe an American because of some stereotypes that we have for traveling abroad. And so I'm very grateful then, like, oh, yay, I'm so glad I'm Petita. So yeah, I think it is a good way to look at it as tools.
Mhm. Yep.
Okay, if I had to tell people what Andale Prieta is about, is it a biography? I mean, is 100% accurate, or you tell me.
It is. It's I would say there's a slight difference, I think, between biography and memoir. I would say memoir because I use fiction writing techniques.
Okay.
When I think of biography, I think of like the biography of Eleanor Roosevelt, and it's just
Yeah, okay.
So it's a memoir. It is factual. Everything that I wrote in there, it happened. I think it's important to note it's through my lens, though, right? It's my experiences. When my family read it, I preempted them, like, hey, this is the way I saw it, like, don't get upset. And so they knew. They're like, okay. And it was really nice. My uncle sent me a text and said, I wish I would have seen things the way you had at certain times. And so it is very much factual about me. Yeah.
Okay, and what about your book, Harrison? I mean, it's like, because it seems like it's based on your own story too, right?
Yeah, it is. It's nonfiction. It's everything in there is through my experience. I guess it's like a hybrid book. It's a lyric essay, which is a combination of poetry and essay, and there's some artwork. But yeah, to try and figure out this space, I was trying to figure out. The only way I could do it was to make it a hybrid mixed thing. And that's why it's written the way it is. And
how's your feedback with people who will identify with some of the characters, some of the comments that you make?
Yeah, we'll see. No.
Oh, nobody read it yet?
I'll let you know. No. I don't know. I mean, I think I'm hoping that people who were hyphenated are gonna at least maybe understand the search. If not the style or whatever, it's just to try and claim that space, however weird and messy it is.
Okay,
Yeah.
we have time for one more reading of each of you, and we'll start with Yasmín, and let's see what you want to finish with.
So actually, I think it works out. I'm going to read the last section of my book is in two parts. And so I'm going to read the last section of the first part. And it's actually one of the first pieces I wrote about Maita. And it talks a little bit about El Paso.
So wait. So the way you conceived the book, it was ideas, and then you kind of put together the puzzle. I mean, it wasn't like a linear memoir.
No, it was. I wrote them actually initially as short stories. I was going to do a collection of short stories, and then that wasn't working, so I had to rethink. And so it's not linear at all. No, different sections were written at different times and pieced together.
Okay.
Okay. The heat was suffocating, inescapable. Ita and I sat in the living room watching the evening news from the front door, open to capture whatever breeze might pass by. We could at least dream there would be a breeze in this dry desert. The stars twinkled behind the large screen door, making it seem like a window to the outside. It was scary and wonderful, sitting there by the dim lamp light. When the news ended, we got ready for bed. I put on my cotton nightgown and sat, waiting for my grandma as she performed her nightly ritual. The red brick house, built in 1920, and a row with similar houses on blocks unfolding down the sloped end of the Rocky Mountains, was so old the rooms didn't have light switches. There was only a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling in the middle of the room, and it kept us safe from the dark. I sat in bed, legs stretched out and crossed, watching Ita as she took off her makeup. She used cold cream and a pair of men's old threadbare underwear, which were covered with black smudges of mascara and eyeliner and colored tinges from the many eyeshadows she wore. She wiped at her face until it glistened as if she used the old underwear to polish it. I wondered whose calzones had belonged, but never asked. I like to imagine they were Tony's, my favorite of all her husbands. The Mexican radio station played fuzzily in the background. I stared at the window and into the darkness. The window's thick wooden frame was another portal into the unknown. The only safe place was sitting here, watching Ita.
Oh, nice, very nice. Very nice, yeah, exactly. Palillos, que decimos en España. Okay, Hudson.
Okay, so this one I've never read before. And I guess it's an attempt to reconcile this theme that I have. And it's called Inheritance. And it goes like this. I have a name once sent with a letter from a Route 66 flat where a man sits alone on a Davenport couch with Pall Mall upholstery and his trouser leg crossed while he waits for the ember to redden his skin. 2. I have a name passed down on a ladder of men handing buckets of cigarette smoke to sons left standing in thresholds of flame. They could extinguish themselves by walking away. 3. I have a name that never quite fit, too snug on the chest, too loose on the arms, though it set me apart in the desks at school, from Esquivel and Garcia, Duran and Gallegos, so distinctive and sure at the top of the page, like a plaque on a mantle or a uniform badge, pinned in place, tight as a mask. 4. I have a name saying something of me I cannot say of myself, half roots unknown, half history unseen, half of a whole, an absence above, below, in between.
We're getting close to the end, and I would like to know, I mean, because the idea of a book and of writing a book has changed so much through the last years, right? What are these expectations? What kind of I mean, I know you probably want a lot of people to read the book, and that's what the books are for, right? In different formats. But what kind of expectations have a writer these days? I mean, you go on, give lectures or these public readings. Is there any openness for somebody who writes a book these days?
I hope so.
I think so.
I'm right in the middle of that now. So, but yes, yeah. But go ahead, Yasmín. How's your book tour going?
No, I hope so. I think so. I think there's also, I don't know if you look at social media. I look at social media a lot. Like there's book talkers and book Instagrammers and book lists and must read lists and online book clubs. And I think the various platforms that books are accessible now, ebooks, audiobooks, physical book, makes it easier for people to take in our work.
Yeah, I think I'm not a huge social media person, but I think these days that it's easier for word of mouth to get around. And I think that books are finding the audiences that they're finding the homes that they hope to find. So like, Yasmín's book, and there's little pockets of people, and you got to read this, and it's easier to get that word out now than it used to be, I think. So, still waiting for that sit down with Oprah, but
yeah, well, you just started, guys. So, anyways,
guys, there is a question actually, and somebody has asked about the books that you're currently reading. Okay. Two-part question, and if any of you have a specific author in particular who you feel has influenced you the most, and it's for all three of you actually, that question.
That is a hard question. I mean, I can go now. I mean, if I'm reading a lot, I'm reading a couple of books from my colleagues. Tomas Morin just came out with a book of poems and a memoir, Let Me Count the Ways, which is beautiful. And I'm really enjoying that. An author that's really influenced me as a New Mexican writer, I have to give, my tribute to Rodolfo Anaya, who was among the New Mexican writers who, like I said, gave me permission to tell our stories. It's like, he really influenced me in just being able to tell the story about growing up, how you grew up. And the list goes on. Sandra Cisneros, of course, and Lorna Cervantes, and a lot of the Chicano writers influenced me too. Just the hybridity that they were exploring was just really inspiring.
Hey, that I was trying to think of my book titles while you were talking. So I'm reading a couple of things right now. Right now I'm reading actually two like more academic books. It's and the title just escaped me. It's about creative writing classes and sort of deconstructing the anti-racist creative writing. I'm reading that book. And then I'm also reading a book about feminism, but I try to alternate. Like I just finished a YA book, an LGBTQ plus YA book called The Boyfriend Dilemma. So I alternate. I'll read really serious books and then I'll read something lighter and easier for me. Authors who have influenced me. So I actually didn't discover any Chicano writers or Latino writers until I was in college. And then I didn't discover more until I was in my MFA program. So even though I was a big reader, I just didn't find my surnames like on shelves easily. But one of the writers that has influenced me a lot, not just in his work, but he's really mentored me is Richard Yanez, and he's from El Paso. And so he has sort of taken me under his wing and read my work and given me feedback, and he's been integral into my sort of pushing forward, and I love that he wrote about the city. Benjamin Saenz also has been really great. I was glad to study with him, and I'm his friend now, which sounds so amazing. He's a New York Times bestselling author and he's my friend. So that he was also very, very kind to me and my work.
But you,
are you guys, do you guys listen to podcasts at all? I mean, of the.
Yes.
Yeah, but some about the Latino background or the Latino.
Yeah. I listen to Code Switch, which I love.
Me too. I love that one.
Which one? Sorry.
Code Switch. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. I listen to Radio Ambulante. I think it's great.
Yeah.
It's great.
Those guys are funny.
I don't know, Helen, if you have more questions there. I mean, I'm not really savvy here, and I'm not.
Yeah, no, that was it. That was just the question about
okay.
your reading preferences and who influenced you. And I think everybody's been sitting and enjoying listening to you read and talk about your books. And so I think that's about it for us. And I would like to thank you, Guillermo, for moderating such a great conversation.
No, I learned a lot. Thank you. Thank Oblong Books for giving me this opportunity.
Well, we really appreciate you joining us, and Yasmín and Harrison as well, for a wonderful conversation. A reminder that copies of Andale Prieta and Finding Carencia are available at Oblong Books and online at oblongbooks.com. Before we close, I would like to extend our thanks to Mad Creek Books and Lee and Low Books for helping make this event happen, and to thank all of you who took time out of your evening to join us tonight. And I encourage you to go to that link and learn about all the great events that are going on for the Big Read in our area throughout the whole of the month, and take advantage and read some new books and meet some new people and just celebrate reading this month. Thank you all very, very much. And with that, I will bid you a good night.
Thank you, Guillermo.
Take care.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Adios.
Thank you, Helen.